Welcome to Issues, and we're so very pleased to have you with us. We would welcome your comments, and you may send your comments, you may email your comments to issuesbda@yahoo.com. Once again, that's issuesbda@yahoo.com. This evening we're going to be talking about success. What does success really mean? Can everyone achieve success? Is success easier for an individual if they're black or white, if they are male or female? These are some of the things that we're going to be discussing this evening. And with us, we have Ralph Richardson. Some of you may know Ralph from his Commodore days at the Yacht Club, but we're going to delve a little bit more and find out what success means to Mr. Richardson. Welcome, Ralph. We're happy to have you with us.
It's good to be here, Richard.
My first question is, what is your definition of success?
If you can indulge me, I like to share stories.
Yes.
A few years ago, I had the privilege of giving a lecture to a group of students at the Bermuda College. They were all Bermudians. They were half American and half Bermudian, and probably about 30 in the group. There was a visiting group of students, and I asked them their definition of success. And it was very interesting. I got the answers I expected. You know, a big house, a big car, a BMW, a good job, making a lot of money, and that was what they thought was success. And then I had a list of people who were well-known stars and football and other athletes. And I asked them to consider some of the things that were happening in their lives. It was very topical at the time. So there were some that were having problems with children, and some had gotten into trouble with drugs and the law and everything. And I asked them, you know, these people make a lot of money, and they're successful still. What do you think the wealth that you're talking about mean to them right now? And we had a discussion on that. And then we took a break, and we came back, and I said, well, let's talk about success again, and what do you think it means? And they came back, and they said, well, to us now it means, you know, having a beautiful house with a proper family, and having a good reputation in the community, and all those things they felt were success. And in the end, we talked about the actual dictionary definition of success. Success is achieving that which you set out to do, and in some case, that you didn't set out to do. You can be successful. And so I said, you know, that you can even be successful if you plan to rob a bank, and you pull it off.
That's true.
I said, that's success. So I think success can have a negative and a positive meaning. And it's probably not the best word to use if you were trying to ask anyone about positive things, because I think that if you talk about self-fulfillment and real happiness, that type of thing, it doesn't always come with the word success.
So, as I'm listening to you, and I would agree with you, any one of us can achieve success depending what it is we want to achieve.
Absolutely.
And as you said, it can be negative or it can be positive. I would think that most of us, or most of the world, probably define success as some of those young people did, in terms of the big house, the big car, the yacht, and so forth. By the way, you do have a yacht, don't you? So some of the definition that you've used, people would look at you and say, yes, Mr. Richardson, you have been successful. Now, as we look at these material things, is success attainable to everyone? And let's look at Bermuda. Is success the house, the car, the yacht? Does everyone have an opportunity to achieve something like that?
Well, that's if you consider those things a measure of success. I think no. But everyone has an opportunity for success. I think a person who does not make a lot of money but is successful in the way they bring up their children. They have successful children. They have self-esteem. They feel good about themselves. They volunteer their time for the community, and basically have become a role model. And I think about one of our friends, Kevin, who recently was awarded, who's receiving an award from the Queen. I don't think he's very wealthy, and he probably doesn't have a yacht or a BMW, but he's dedicated a lot of his life to this community, and I think, you know, it's worthy of.
Well, Ralph, if success is not seen in the material things we achieve, how does one develop that keen sense for success, which may mean a happy family, kids that love you, those type of things? Where does that come from? Because most of us are going to be looking for the big house and the big car. So what needs to change within us, or where does that other definition of success come from if it's not the big house or the big car?
Well, I think our values come from our environment, from television, from our friends, from our neighborhoods, from the people around us. And we consider success to be equated with the things we have. Mm-hmm. And so far, I don't see a lot of happiness. I think Bermuda's become more successful than it's ever been in its history. Mm-hmm. But we see more violence. We see more people that are unhappy on their jobs. Mm-hmm. They don't like what they do. Many people have high-paying jobs. And I've talked to many people who complain every day about having to go in. It's almost like a curse. They've actually been drawn into a lifestyle that they can now afford, but the sacrifices they make to be able to afford those things are something that they didn't bargain for.
Now, were you born with a silver spoon in your mouth? Did you come from an upper-class family in terms of helping you to achieve what you have achieved so far?
I think the Richardsons always thought they were, but my grandmother is from St. David's, and I grew up in a single-parent home. My mother had 2 children. And we lived on Court Street, right across from where the spinning wheel is now. And just for about 4 years. But I grew up on Glebe Road, what is now called 42nd Street.
Back of town.
Back of town. We were a very, I didn't realize it then, but we were a very poor family. We never felt poor. Mm-hmm. There was always a lot of family. We lived in a house that was a blended family. In one house, 9 people in one fairly small house. But we never ever felt poor. And my mother and her 2 children lived on Court Street. When she left the house and took us over to Court Street, we lived there from 1959 to 1964. Dale Butler actually was one of my neighbors, and we were good buddies and friends. But that is, no one on Court Street felt poor. Mm-hmm. We felt like we had everything. We could compare with other children. Many of the other kids had bicycles before we did and all of that. But we played together, we had fun, and we enjoyed life. Well, so no, I didn't have a silver spoon. And in fact, if you could sort of have guessed the person least likely to succeed, it probably would have been me. Mm-hmm. I wasn't very good in school either.
You're saying you weren't very good in school?
No. I did at one point. It was a very late part. In fact, when we went to high school, I went to the Berkeley Institute, which was the academic school.
Oh, you went to Berkeley?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Well, then...
I failed every subject almost. I liked writing. That was the only thing that I did fairly well in English. But everything else, I failed math. I couldn't stand physics. And for 3 years, I suffered through that. And then my mother had the presence of mind to allow me to transfer to the Bermuda Technical Institute. Mm-hmm. And then I was doing technical subjects, and finally physics made sense. In fact, the same physics I was doing at Berkeley, I started to get distinction. Came first in my class for the first time in my life, because now there was an applied application. It turned out that I liked technical subjects, and so that made a change in my life. But initially it wasn't very well.
Listening to you, a question comes to my mind. Sometimes, is it possible that the harder times one goes through, the more urgency and the greater urge they may have to achieve success? Is that possible? Hard times can hard times lead to success?
I think so. If you dream yourself out of it. I remember in school I had a nickname at Berkeley. They called me Miser. And maybe you're not, you may not understand it, but a miser is a person who daydreams. I daydreamed a lot. I was always dreaming about those things that I wanted to do one day. And I wanted to fly planes, and I wanted to scuba dive, and all the things that I saw on television. I remember watching submarines, and I said, boy, it would be great to do that. And very interesting, you dream dreams that you don't think can happen, and without planning to do it. And remember, I told you success can come without planning.
Yes.
I ended up flying a plane with a friend of mine, and I ended up being a manager and chief pilot of a submarine. And I did get to scuba dive. I'm a licensed scuba diver. These are things I dreamt about when I was 12 and 13 years old.
your interest in sailing, let's look at that before we move on to some things. How did that, how did you develop that interest in sailing?
In 1974, I read a book called The Gray Sea is Under by Fowley Mowat. And after reading that book, I knew that I had to go to sea. I just had this longing to go to sea, to cross the ocean at least once. And I didn't know how it was going to happen. But I was a qualified diesel technician by 1969. But in 1981, I was invited as engineer to travel overseas on a ship. It was a sailing yacht. Then it was one of the most famous yachts in the world. It was the Great Britain II, which had won the first 2 round-the-world races. Wow. And it was a 78-foot maxi. It was an incredible ship. And I went as engineer. I was asked to engineer on a trip.
Not interrupted, but it would seem to me, Ralph, that even from back then, you were achieving success to be invited to go on that sailing ship. So you.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I met the owner because I went down to see the boat, and she said she was having a bunch of problems. It was a female captain and owner, and I offered to get her machinery ready for an ocean trip. I didn't think I'd be traveling with her. And then after 10 days of free service, I donated the service. She invited me to come because she needed me around. And I ended up traveling with 6 of us. The ship normally carried a crew of 18. And we left here in a storm in March of 1981. We sailed to the Caribbean and back. And that same year, I was engineer on one more sailing yacht to the Virgin Islands, to the Caribbean. And I determined after that I would never go again as engineer. So I went up to the college and did a celestial navigation course and started to do trips as navigators.
Yeah. So your interest in sailing peaked from the invitation to go on that.
For the first time, yeah, that was the first time.
Good.
It was my first sailing trip, and I've gotten over 20,000 miles now in several ocean races. And so I really enjoy it. I had the privilege this year of doing the Newport to Bermuda race as well.
Could you share real quickly with us one of your experiences in terms of the Newport to Bermuda? And you've probably done the Newport to Bermuda race more than once.
No,
just once?
This was the first time.
Oh, okay.
I've done the Marion to Bermuda race about 6 times, 6 or 7 times, and I've done the Annapolis to Bermuda race. And however, every time I was invited to the Newport race, there was a conflict. For some reason, it just happened that way. And then once I joined the yacht club and became a flag officer, flag officers have to participate in all of the pre-race events and the post-race, and that we were not allowed to race. So for several years that I spent with as a flag officer, which is several officerships before you become Commodore, I wasn't allowed to race. So I had to wait until after the Commodoureship, after all the invitations. Finally, last year I was invited and was able to do it. So.
And if you could, a real quick experience and something that might have happened as you sail from Newport to Bermuda. Did any interesting things ever happen?
Interesting things always happen, and probably not in the Newport race. So you know, it was an interesting race. It was rough weather, and crossing the Gulf Stream was very rough. And I got seasick for the first time at sea.
Captain Ralph Richardson getting seasick.
I mean, it was pretty rough. And one of the worst places you want to be ever in a rough sea is at the navigation table. You need to be outside. And we were doing some important navigation at the time. And but I was sick for about 4 or 5 hours. And then on the other side, there was nothing at all. I was quite okay for the rest of the trip. So for a trip of 3 or 4 days, that's not so bad, 4 or 5 hours. Yeah.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to ask Ralph about how did he become Commodore of the Yacht Club. By the way, it's my understanding that he is the first black person to be Commodore of the Yacht Club. So we'll find out some more about that when we come back. Thank you. Welcome back to Issues. Again, we would love to have your comments, and you may email your comments to issuesbda@yahoo.com. This evening we're talking with Ralph Richardson, past Commodore of the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club. During the break, Mr. Richardson corrected me and told me it's not the Yacht Club, it's the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club. Mr. Richardson, tell us, how did you achieve that goal of becoming Commodore of the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club?
Well, the interesting thing, it was never a goal. I met several past Commodores and incoming Commodores during my ocean sailing, and I got to meet them. And one of them became one of my best friends, John Thompson, the late John Thompson, past Commodore of the club. We sailed together, and we used to run together 3 times a week from the yacht club. And after 3 or 4 years of that, an incoming Commodore said to me once, he said, "It's about time you start paying for the use of the facilities here." And that was some sort of a comical way of inviting me to join. So I had a friend who introduced me as a member of the club, and I joined the club in 2000, January 1, 2000. And I never intended to be anything more than a nominal member. And shortly after a book signing that I held at the club, the then Commodore asked if I'd join the executive. I should have been worried a little bit at that point. So I was on the executive for a while, and then they asked me if I'd become Rear Commodore. They had to explain a little bit about the role. And the Rear Commodore is the first position. It's a flag officer position, and that is the first step towards becoming Commodore. So it's about a 6 to 9 year commitment. In my case, it was a little bit short because the person before me had to step out, and they didn't think I was ready, so they invited a past Commodore to come back to help me through the Vice Commodoreship for 1 year, and then after that I was on my own. So it took me about 4 years to get there, and then 2 years as Commodore.
Let me ask you, Ralph, in terms of being the first black Commodore, am I correct?
Yes, that's right.
At any point, did you ever feel, oh, I'm black, or did you were just another, or were you just another person being the Commodore? Was there ever any attention drawn to your color, other than maybe the newspaper pointing out that you were the first black person?
Not at the yacht club. I think if people disagreed with you, they'd let you know. It didn't matter. And I think at the time you reach that particular level, you have. You've made real friends and enemies. You know, there are people that like you and that don't, and it doesn't have anything to do with color. I think effectively the yacht club was looking for leadership, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And in my entire life, I very rarely thought of color and with limitations. If I dreamt about doing something, quite often it would happen whether I planned it or not. And I believe in divine providence. I don't think anything happens in anyone's life without by accident. I think there's a plan, and quite frankly, I cannot believe many of the things that have happened to us.
Yeah. Now, I believe you and your wife went to China at one time, was it, or Japan or China? Did that take place?
Yes, I had a friend who has had several conferences around the world. In fact, I went to Brazil. He asked me to come to Brazil to present at a Young Entrepreneurs Conference. They had 1,800 young entrepreneurs. The wealthiest man in China, a young man in his early 30s, was there. And I presented at one of the breakout sessions. And as a sort of a thank you for doing that for him, I was invited to China to participate in a global conference on tourism. It wasn't travel agents, it was heads of country and heads of government. That, in fact, the president of Tanzania was due to be there, and as he was on the plane, one of his senior ministers died, and he got off the plane. But he had a delegation of 25 people that came. We had a Bermuda Premier, Dr. Hugh Brown, actually was at the same conference and hosted a formal occasion at the Great Hall of the People. I thought I'd never even see China, but unless the Great Hall of the People is a place, Richard, if everyone was sitting down in all of the rooms, 30,000 people would be sitting down, and you go as a guest of the President of China, and that was arranged by my friend at the time. So that was quite an experience for us.
Now, talking about traveling, I believe in 2012, you and your wife had tea with the Queen. Am I correct with that?
Yes, but I like to put things in perspective. Yes.
First of all, tell us, how did you arrange that? How was it arranged? Were you invited? How did that happen?
We received a letter. It was totally unsolicited from Government House that said that the Queen has 3 tea parties every summer, and that we were recommended to go. We had to fill out a resume and send it back to Government House. They sent it on to Buckingham Palace, and about 5 weeks later, we received a letter from Government House saying we were accepted. That's how it happened. I had no idea why we were invited until we got there. We started to talk to other people. Why are you here? And to put it in perspective, there were 8,000 other people at this tea party. The Queen just walked through the throngs. No one got a chance to be close to her. We had the privilege of actually meeting her here in Bermuda in 2009 when she came to for our 400th anniversary. And as Commodore of the Yacht Club at the time, I was invited to Government House along with a small group of people to actually meet her. So I had the privilege of meeting her before last year, or a year before last. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. That's excellent. Yeah. I think there are some of us who aspire to achieve some of the things that we've heard take place in your life this evening, because truly some of those things signify success. And I do recognize that you mentioned earlier that success is achieving a goal. It's not necessarily monetary, it's not necessarily material, but as we listen to you this evening, you have achieved some of those goals, and truly you have been blessed. Now, Ralph, let me put this difficult question to you. Here in Bermuda, as we look at the economy, which hopefully will be improving, as we look at the crime that's taking place, in our families as we grow up, do you think the home environment plays a role in our future success?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of the problems we're having are because of dysfunctional families. There are some that say single-parent homes. I don't believe that. I came from a single-parent home. It was my sister and I. My sister is a doctor in Oregon. I don't think a single-parent home has anything to do with it, but I think the lack of fathers in a child's life is important. And I think that there are many other things. But I think there's even more important today, the influences that impact our children. Several years ago, in a meeting of government leaders, I actually made a statement that we had just gotten TV, cable TV at that time. Bermuda had just gotten cable TV, and I started to see some of the things that were being shown. And I predicted then, in a very important meeting of leaders, that if we don't do something about the influence that this is going to have on our children, we're going to see violence in Bermuda like we'd never had it before. One of the people at the time scoffed at me, and in fact, at the same time I said, we've actually taken TV out of our home. Our children were young. We could not, every time I looked, they were trying to get a little look at BET and things like that. And so I actually took the TV out of the house until they all went off to college. When they came back, it was there. Yeah. But the person who chastised me when I said that said, you know, the problem with you, Ralph, is that you can't control TV in your own home. Said, I hope you're investing the money you're saving by not having cable. And I think he's totally missed the point. But I think there's lots of other external influences, not just the family, that are causing the challenges we have today.
You say, would you mind mentioning maybe one or two of those other things as you see affecting society today in terms of maybe diminishing one's individual ability to succeed? You said the family could be one factor. What are some others that you may see?
I personally think, and not everybody agrees, this does not represent the view of my family, but I think the hip-hop culture has probably done more damage, especially to young black males, than anything. The denigration of women, the glorification of drugs, and anti-law, anti-establishment. That's, to me, what it means. And the kids are singing it, they understand it, it's a part of the culture, and it permeates the entire culture. Spike Lee was here a few years ago, and he did a lecture up at Southampton Princess. I went, and this statement made it on the CNN News the next day. Spike Lee said, the greatest enemy to black males in the United States is BET.
Wow.
He said that. So maybe people don't agree with it, but I thought that in my house, when it first came and took the TV out. So that's how important I think those influences are.
And I would agree with you. I see young men, their pants halfway down their bottom, and many times you find individuals who may dress a certain way, who may listen to a certain type of music habitually. You may find them hanging around with other groups of people who at times tend to get themselves in trouble. But having said that, let me ask this real quickly. Even though someone may start off hanging around with the wrong people, even getting in trouble sometimes, does that mean that success is unattainable for them, even though they might be in trouble at a young age?
Absolutely not. Most of us were not angels when we were young people, and certainly I remember my youth. I was an entertainer, and you know, there were things that were happening in the entertainment world that that were not very good, and so. But you know, we grew out of that. If we find a positive reason to live and to if we decide, it's all about decision. You make a choice to stay in a particular environment or to grow beyond that. Most of the people that I know, many of the people I know that were hippies or into all kinds of things when they were younger.
You date yourself when you say hippies.
Yeah, so that was a long time ago. But you know, people did all kinds of things when they were younger, and now they're positive role models in the community because they grew out of it. Youth are youth. Young people want to explore. They want to do new things. They want to make their own decisions. Sometimes they're wrong, but it's up to them, and eventually they make the choice.
Yeah. One of my last questions, Ralph, in terms of achieving success, the big house, the big car, does one have to make a choice between that type of success and success in the family, raising good children, having a good relationship with your wife? The time that it takes to become successful, does one have to sacrifice the time that it takes to have a good family?
Today, yes, in some cases. I think there's a gentleman that I met. He was the #2 guy at Intel. He came here and he gave a lecture one morning, and he gave us all his book. And his book's about balancing family, work, and church. And it's an interesting book. Most of us, including myself, have had difficulty finding that balance. You can be successful, but every person, especially men and fathers, have to find that balance. I'm just finding it now. Yeah. It's sort of taken all my life to find it. But the balance is really being able to give time with your children, now children and grandchildren, and around the house, and with your wife, and work. And that work-life balance is very difficult to find. The corporations that we have here now don't always allow it, and that's why so many people aren't happy. You know, you give a pound of flesh and they'll take 2 or 3, and so I think it's. But you know, people want it, but it's to get the big house and it's to get all those things, and I don't regret anything that I've done in the choices that I've made. You can't do anything about them now, but I do think that. If I had started over again, I would have looked for that work-life balance. So we do make choices on that.
Thank you, Ralph. Okay. This evening we've had Ralph Richardson with us, past Commodore of the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club. By the way, one thing that Ralph, we didn't have time to mention, when Ralph retired, the governor at that time, by the way, Ralph, who was the governor at that time that got invited to your retirement party?
Richard Gosling.
Yes, Sir Richard Gosling. Imagine having the governor at your retirement party. That's truly a success. Again, we've had Ralph Richardson with us. We've enjoyed talking with him, looking at some aspects of success. And we invite you to join us again next time on Issues.